Salam.
Hi.
How are you?
Durud. I'm good. How are you?
Durud. I'm good. I'm shocked that we figured this out because we dealt with flooding. Our studio, our home studio, was like, what, 3-4 inches of rain?
Wow.
Because I had to show you buckets because I'm like, she's not going to believe that this place is literally shut the fuck down.
And all just from LA rain.
Yeah.
Who could believe it?
Us. LA's fucking cold and rainy.
That's true. Sometimes. I mean, listen, you're talking to a Londoner.
True. Do you miss it?
That's a loaded question. Yes. The culture is very, very different. But to me, London's always going to have like a feeling of home.
Yeah.
So I miss the feeling of home. Being in America, it just feels like you're in the big, bad world by yourself, you know? You don't know because you're from here.
I love London, though.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Yeah?
There's something about it that feels very...
Honest,
fancy. It feels super diverse. I feel like I'm in the world diverse. And like it feels more home than it does here because there's such a huge population of Middle Eastern, African, Asian, Asia. And I think like I don't know. I would love to live. I think I would, but the weather is like not a vibe.
That's the only thing. I think the reason for me that the reason I can articulate why London feels that way in it, because I used to, when I would talk about LA or, I don't know, California, I'd be like, there's no diversity. And people would be like, it's literally one of the top 5 most diverse cities in the world.
Is it?
It is. And I couldn't figure it out. I would think to myself, well, I don't get it because I just feel like London. But then what I realized is that it's not the lack of diversity. Both London and LA are both very diverse. It's the integration. London is so integrated. Every class, race, ethnicity, whatever, we're all lumped in together and we live together. We go to schools together. We live like in our neighborhoods. It's like next to me is on the right is Polish. Next to me on the left is like Bangladeshi. You know, it's like just it's an integrated lot, you know, in every way. Even when you walk the streets of London, which I think is a little bit like New York, you turn one avenue and it's like poorer neighborhoods, and then you turn the next road and it's like extremely affluent. And these communities are always colliding and living side by side. So you have such a worldly perspective being from London. Everything just feels so worldly because you're in the world.
Well, why are we here today to talk? Because this is we talk all the time.
We do.
We argue all the time. We debate all the time. It's borderline harassment at times. It's yelling. No, no, you read my article. No, you read my article. It's it's a lot of debating. I think that's because for the most part, it's been a lonely time to be a thinker. It's been a lonely time to be unsure. It's been a lonely time to be asking questions. It's been a lonely time to talk to anyone that is willing to change their mind.
Yep.
It's been a lonely time to not want people to die.
Yeah.
It's been a lonely time to not, I can go through the list,
Yeah.
not hate everyone,
Yeah.
not think people deserve it, to believe women, to want children to be safe.
And you know, the reason that it's been a lonely time is because we can't find a consistent group of people to share an easy, straightforward thought because there isn't one. So usually when we don't feel lonely as thinkers, the reason that we feel unlonely, not lonely, is because we have people around us who can be firm in similar positions. Here's my position, what's yours? Oh, exactly the same. Okay, so we feel this sense of togetherness. But because of the vagueness and the nuance and the gray of so much that's happening in the world right now, you can't get anyone to sit firmly in a thought unless when they do, it kind of almost feels radical, you know, and that doesn't feel safe either. So it's a lonely time to be a thinker because we're all so confused about what we're thinking, and in a good way. Because if ever you sit there and you're like, I've got it with this kind of stuff, it's straight, it's easy, this is it, you're probably missing something. So it's almost elevating our consciousness, the fact that we're all such confused thinkers. We're having these moral internal tugs of war with ourselves, you know, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. I want to be doing the right thing, but am I doing the right thing? And that confusion is what's causing everyone to feel so isolated because we can't even support each other in a single thought.
Yeah.
It's too hard.
It is. contrary to the majority of people I know, I've actually made more friends during this since October 7th than lost in this weird way, in the sense that I've like leaned into trying to connect with other people that want to figure it out versus like, I fucking decided.
Yeah.
I was always right. It's all my,
Absolutely.
like, I'm totally just in my perspective. And so it's been kind of cool in this weird way since the 7th, because there's like a handful of new friends that I've made who have been willing to fucking try to look at it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of an ugly thing to be looking at.
It is. And especially, you know, when you have an account that's kind of large or growing or whatever, you're having to kind of keep happy an incredibly diverse audience of people who have like completely conflicting ideas, ideologies, belief systems. And every day you have this kind of maze of like, how do I get this truth out and still avoid these like booby traps of like exploding here and pissing like an entire group of people off? And like, how do I walk in this truth and compassion and all of those things while still staying like not hurtful?
I think like before we get into the like the war, the conflict, the crisis, it's like, why do we even care? Like, why are you so active in everything that goes on for the 7th? I'm active because I believe that Israel, Palestine, and Iran are all connected, and how goes this conflict goes Iran. And so that's why when everyone says I'm centering myself, it's because Iran is either on the verge of going to the bottom of the ocean in an abyss, or Iran's on the verge of being freed.
Exactly.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, whatever has been going on in Iran with the Islamic Republic for the past 45 years, whatever the Islamic Republic is, it seeks to spread itself.
Yep.
And that's what people don't understand. That is really what the essence of imperialism is. It's a thing that seeks to spread itself, which is the same case with fundamentalism, right? If something's evil and contained, that's one thing. But if it seeks to spread itself, you always constantly have to be mindful of the ways that it's spreading itself. And the Islamic Republic does that through its proxies. But it's not just about the military and proxy wars that they engage in. It's the ideology that they spread with that, right? And you see it now, because now you see, like, we never in a million years would have imagined that there would be like a whole cohort of people, like a massive percentage of people in the world who actually look to these ideologies now, right, in a favorable or sympathetic light. And as Iranians, you know, what we've been through and what we know, it's so mind-blowing to us that people would look at that and be like, oh, actually, you know, they're the heroes. These are the, you know? And so it's just such testimony to the fact that their ideologies are successful. The growth of their ideologies are being successfully done so. Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think you said to me once on the phone, and it always makes me laugh and chuckle, is like, when Iranians do good, we're so amazing. It's like Cyrus the Great. We're building refrigerators in hospitals. We're like revolutionizing the Middle East. And when we're bad, we're also so epically awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and this is the other, like, I don't think people understand the Islamic Republic is a media, marketing, messaging ideology, like on steroids. We're not talking about ISIS. We're not talking about Taliban. We're not sorry, no disrespect to these other groups.
Their PR is
but it's not even level. it's like the Nike Apple of this extremism. Like, they are so good. It's like partnering with Mandela and like support Black imams, like genius. Going to South Africa, like murals of Black Lives Matter everywhere, and like tweeting at like Nipsey Hussle's like widow when he passed away. And like, they have indoctrinated themselves like into this oppressor and oppressed culture.
They figured it out perfectly, and it was because of that conduit between the Washington lobby and the Islamic Republic, where that information was passed back. Here's how you get the leftists. You prey on this, you prey on imperialism, you prey on Islamophobia, you prey on anti-Middle Eastern hate, all of the things. Anti-West, yes.
I mean, that's how they got us to begin with. I mean, like, who ultimately... My parents came here in the early 70s. They loved
Yeah.
the Shah of Iran. My mom was a 16-year-old girl that was sent here to come to go to high school and college by her father. This Islamic country that doesn't support feminism. So, like, imagine that. Imagine a woman who's sent here, you know, to come and get an education on her own with her brother to meet my father at a university and they get married. Like, that country was on its way to, like, massive progress.
And that's why they had to take that down. And they did so with all of that propaganda, the whole anti-Western thing, you know? And you have to think about how successful this propaganda was, that there's things that, like, people will repeat, and when they ask themselves questions about it, I don't even think they know how to answer it. Like, for example, a whole bunch of people, whenever I talk about Iran before the Islamic Republic, and not even specific about the Shah, just how it was before, right? People will always say to me in my comments, obviously non-Iranians, they'll be like, oh, but the Shah was a Western puppet, right? They say Western, 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 which was Khomeini propaganda. And then you have to ask the question, what is it in your eyes that makes the Shah Western, right? And they say, oh, well, you know, he built like these really strong relationships with like America and all these different countries. Okay. So when your government, your country, America, whatever your Western government is, build strong networks with other countries, that's good and that's fine. But when we brown folk extend ourselves beyond the Middle East, we're self-hating and Western. You don't want us to be great. What's Western about having relations, friendly, positive relations with different countries, rather than being constantly in an enemy state with everybody, at war with everyone, because that's how you think brown people roll? Like, brown people should always be in a state of terrorism. So when this Shah had great relations with others, oh, he's Western. And then he wanted to, like, modernize the country, right? Oh, that's so Western. Why? Because brown countries have to always be in this state of regression and oppression and like some shacks made of wood. Like,
Totally.
what is Western about progress unless you fundamentally believe that brown people are unprogressive? That is Orientalism. That's racism. So when they say things like that, like, oh, this was a Western, like, what you need to ask yourself the question of where you got that perception of Western from when you talk about an Iran that was becoming great.
I mean, for us, I feel like no Iranian I know, whether we're friends or not, sleeps well between, call it like 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. every night, waiting for an execution, waiting for the threat of an execution. If there was 800 executions last year, how many nights last year did you sleep well?
Mm-hmm.
That you weren't like checking your phone and like
Right.
manically on Twitter, like
Never.
seeing.
Yeah.
You're like the first one to throw
Awful.
up.
Yeah.
He's dead.
Awful year. Awful year.
Yeah. What does that do to someone having to witness that?
That's a good question. What does it do? I think it changes you.
Yeah.
It changes you a lot, but it's really difficult to explain like all the ways that it changes you. I think one of the most difficult parts of it is the normalization, that when you constantly expose yourself to it, you end up normalizing that reality is just like a part of our existence, you know? And so there's always a little kind of like spark or something in me when I post something about Iran, you know, like when Roya received the 75 lashes or whatever it is that I post, and people respond with such just like shock. I'm like, oh my God, you know? I always get this kind of like spark of like, this is outrageous. Why do I normalize that this just happens to us? Like, it's so shocking to people, but it's almost just like, well, this is just the life that we've always known, you know?
I have to believe that there's something we can do to change it. Part of me wants to believe that if more people know about what's going on with them, that different decisions will be made. That people will have a higher consciousness around the decisions they're making, because we both know that it's business people keeping the Islamic Republic in power. It's not militaries.
Yeah.
It's not that they're so robust from a capabilities perspective. It's not like that they have a nuclear bomb. They're just fucking scary because they don't give a flying fuck.
Right. Well, you know, the people of Iran need to be the ones to take out their government, but we can help them by not empowering the Islamic Republic, which is the message that the diaspora has been saying for years now, right? Their ideology is more successful outside of Iran than it is inside of Iran. Fuck! Because
this is so true. Why?
Exactly.
Why?
Because
why doesn't everyone see that? Why? Okay, that simple fucking statement. Why does everyone not get that?
Because
Why does everyone not get that inside Iran they don't want the Islamic Republic?
Yeah.
But outside of Iran, all of the world wants to tell us.
Because in the West, like, they intellectualize everything because they don't have real world experience, right?
Or do you mean problems?
Problems, everything. You're talking about living in the West, and you can't generalize to that extent, but in general, you can't generalize, but in general, compared to the rest of the world, it's generally a more privileged experience, okay? They aren't constantly dealing with war, famine, destruction, whatever, right? Constant threats, constant daily threats. And so through this comfort, there's this like almost like over time, they become so deep in this intellectualization because there's a lack of like an emotional reality, like a conscious reality, right? So these ideas of like pain, suffering, fear, war, death, famine, they become just ideas to people in the West. They become just that, and that's how they intellectualize humanity and the human experience, you know? So they get so in their heads about like real world experiences that they're not able to connect to, over time, the more they intellectualize, they're not able to connect to what it's like to actually live these things, to live these ideologies that they talk about, right? So they go down these rabbit holes of like, well, maybe if we hate the West, we should love the Islamic Republic. And then they go into these like rabbit holes of ideologies that when you actually take what they're saying, right, it becomes in such stark contradiction to real lived experiences, because what they can no longer conceptualize is the fact that nobody likes the thing that you're fantasizing about. Like nobody, it doesn't work for anybody. People hate it. You're literally supporting oppression, rape, murder. You don't see it. You've become so disconnected with reality because you're so deep into ideology, you know? And that's where the disconnect comes from.
So my perspective is the West fetishizes like that oppression fight because they have like a secret fantasy to like fight their internal oppressor themselves, and they just love this fantasy.
It's white guilt.
This like white guilt.
A lot of white guilt.
That's what I'm saying. Like they have like a fetish of like, it's like they themselves want to be overthrown so they can feel what it's like to not have power. And it's like a very heady thing, but like I see it.
I think another part of it is that because this concept of white guilt has been very heavy for the Western left for a long time, I think there's finally a deflection from like the lens being on them, right? And having to be like this person that's accused of, you know.
Well, that's what they're like, it's not me.
And then they're like, now it's not me. There's the
it's
foreign war
them.
that they can.
It's Hamas.
It's Hamas, it's Israel,
it's the Houthis, it's all these other. So, but I think just to go back to what you said a second ago, I think what's really important about the Iranian diaspora is that I believe we are the biggest single asset in the resource that the Iranian people have. I think the reason I work so hard to try to be close to everyone who's influential within the diaspora is because they have missiles, they have guns, they have various different violent arsenal. We have our phone. We have the internet. We're English speaking first and foremost. Mm-hmm. I think we have an ability to translate what's going on the ground to help. Like for the first time in my life, there are people who are not Iranian who care about Iran.
Absolutely.
And I think that's because of people like us and our friends and the people that we're, like I've said to you many times, like I may not like everyone in the diaspora, but as long as they stand against the Islamic Republic, mm-hmm. I respect them. Mm-hmm. And so I think since the 7th, we've been in this weird zone where I feel like at first everyone was in shock. I think everyone, at least in my life, like the Iranians in my life felt a profound sense of like shock and like, what the fuck just happened in Israel? Like everyone was just like, what the fuck?
Sorry.
Was that the beginning of many attacks? What is this? Is everyone okay? What's happening? Like there was a lot of, we have so many Iranian Jewish people in our community. Like there was a lot of checking in. I remember for me, for you, like texting, and everyone's like, how's our one friend and another friend? And like everyone's checking in. Is your family okay? Your family. Then all of a sudden, Israel begins its right to defend itself, the response. Like, let's say by October 14th, we're not feeling so great.
No.
We're like, So now we're into like the first week or so of the October 7th. I don't even remember that week. It was
one of the worst weeks
ever.
Yeah. Horrible. Everyone
just looking at those buildings and like all those burned, like you're just like you're wanting to, like, you're sick.
Also just like that, when the like savagery of it was on full display, where we were literally just seeing like dead bodies,
Civilians.
naked bodies, like all of this
Massive,
stuff.
just like normal old people like living in a kibbutz. You're like, why?
And when it was like just very, very just like one-sided, just mass murders, very obvious, all recorded right in front of you. And when you had people that were still just like, they deserve, like, then you're like, oh shit, like they deserve it. Who can, like, not believing it, seeing it in front of you and saying it was like AI propaganda.
Yes.
Like,
or they killed them. They were killed by IDF themselves.
all of it.
Right.
It was just like, there's this almost innate fear as a human that if you can do that to one group of humans, all of us are vulnerable to that, because you have successfully entirely dehumanized a group, okay, to make it a common and popular thought to say, who cares that these innocent people were like killed and raped, blah, blah, blah. That means that they can do it to us. Like, think about the level of priming it takes to dehumanize a group to that extent, right? And you think of all the contradictions in their dehumanization campaign. Like, they say, well, they're living on stolen land, so they deserve it. Literally in America, right? And in America, if you get, God forbid, like killed or raped, you're the first person to turn to the criminal justice system, right? The criminal justice system that we all are like condemning, and what my life's work has been, right? You're the first person to turn to that criminal justice system when you are violated on stolen land. And yet, you humanize yourself so easily. You but I didn't support, and it's not me, and I don't ever have them. Okay, but you can't extend those principles while literally living on stolen land to a different, do you know what I'm saying?
I do, and
I think, there's a lot of this that you can say it comes down to different perspectives, which is true. There are different perspectives, but there's also a lot of misinformation upon which those perspectives were built. And that's the problem. Like, there's a lot of things that people believe that fundamentally are just not true. And if you believed them to be true, it would be easier to have the position that you have. Like, for example, a lot of people don't know that before Israel existed as a state, the way that the land was under the caliphate was that there were Jewish majority neighborhoods and Arab majority neighborhoods, right? That's how the land was. It wasn't just Jews and Arabs and Christians and everyone living together amongst each other. I mean, it was to an extent, but they had Jewish majority neighborhoods, areas, right? And Arab majority areas. When Jews began migrating back to the land in the late 1800s, which incidentally at the same time a lot of Arabs were also migrating to the land from surrounding neighboring Arab countries like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. So there was a lot of influx. Jews were going back to Jewish majority communities and Arabs were going to Arab majority communities. Of course, there was integration within. And the way that they're coming onto these lands is that they're lawfully purchasing lands in their Jewish majority neighborhoods, right? And so when you have people that believe that every Jew on that land is a white European person who went there and like held a gun to someone's head, of course you're going to see things from a different perspective, right? Because now you think people are asking you to reconcile that fact, even though that's literally what America did, right? And they happily live here. They happily reconcile that degree of immorality and say, well, I'm absolutely fine with me living on stolen land, right? But when you have that in a different place where the idea of who the land belongs to is in controversy, right? It's in controversy. You like the belief that the misinformation that there's no Jewish ties to the land, that Jews weren't living there for thousands of years, that Jews just all of a sudden showed up, don't even like include the fact that they were being ethnically cleansed and holocausted out of everywhere and had nowhere to go as refugees, Mizrahi, Sephardic, Ashkenazi refugees. They had nowhere to go than from whence they came, right? To like in refugee boats back to their shores to live in Jewish majority neighborhoods. The people who don't know that, when you talk about their right to be safe or just the right of Israel to exist, that sounds crazy to them because they believe that every Jewish person is a white supremacist, colonizer, apartheid, ethno-state, genocide, settler, Zionist project.
I mean, yes, that is what they believe. And
it's such a reversal of our values as the left, right? In America, for example, where we value, like we put a high value on supporting like refugees, people of color, right? We're talking about Mizrahi Jews in the Middle East who are like being ran out of Iraq, Tunisia, and all of these Middle Eastern countries and returning to their Jewish majority neighborhoods with legally purchased land. And it's like, of course we have to be supportive, right? Supportive of this group of people that are facing so much persecution and so much oppression and aren't harming anybody. This is pre-1948, obviously. There's a distinction, what happens after that. And yet, you're at this point where we're like 4, 5, however many months into this, and people still don't know that that's even the story. People still think that every Jewish person on that land is a white settler, whatever you want to call it, right?
Do you think that people think that because of the content you see or because of the conversations you're having?
I think it's because of anti-Semitism.
No, but I'm saying that what you think, are you saying that that's your thinking because of the content you see people making, or is it because of what people say to you?
Both.
Okay. Because when I see the content people make, that's how I feel. Mm-hmm. When I talk to them on the phone, because I've done this like very, like people are like, is this legit you? And I'm like, yes. Here's my Zoom link. Get on a Zoom and walk me through this. Once I get them on the Zoom, what they acknowledge is, yes, that's what they say for the internet because that's what gets them like.
But why do this is what?
Okay, so I mean,
why do they believe that?
Well, I don't.
That's the question.
I think there's anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Okay. There's definitely like.
Why is it so easy? This is the question of anti-Semitism.
Well, everyone loves to kick someone when they're down, and loves to kick someone that has been consistently down. So that's like a.
But here's what I'm trying to say. You have a story that immediately paints Jews as like satanic evil, all of these things, right?
Yes.
Why is it so easy for you to believe that without being like, should I see if maybe this is like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what do we not give any group the benefit of the doubt? Like, why is it that group?
This situation I thought was simpler. I thought it was simpler. Mm-hmm. But now the more I learn about it, and oddly, who's teaching me the most right now are Jewish people, which is like such a fucking gift. I don't fully understand what happened here with everything pre-1948. When I say pre-1948, I mean like...
That's before Israel was established.
No. What I'm saying is like, because the concept of Israel and a Zionist state was kind of in the works for some time. It had been an idea and a want and a desire. It had been something that had been considered. There's, where does Winston Churchill fit in all of this? Which he's such a complicated personality, man.
But is it relevant?
No, it's not relevant. It's only relevant. It's not relevant. Well,
because
it's relevant in the sense that what people are asking of me is to understand the simple belief and understanding that it wasn't a land with no people for a people with no land. It was a land with people that were called Palestinians, and whether or not, like, what the geographic, you know, like my Jewish friends
Arabs,
say,
Jews, and
like
Christians
my Jewish friends will say there was never a place called Palestine.
Right.
Okay. I'm like, okay, that's what you say and that's what you believe. And I am not at the point where I'm like, this is how I fucking see it, because I just.
But when I say that this is irrelevant, it's because I don't think that what's important is any of that stuff for what we're talking about.
Right.
I think it's the perception of the people involved.
That's what we're talking about. You've got two groups of people that everyone can't stand.
Right.
Who the fuck? Two groups. I've literally in my life never met two groups of people that are so disliked by so many different people.
Right.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like, I sometimes look at it and I'm like I even look at like my friendship with you. Like, we're both like very, like I said, controversial, like either really loved or really not. And I'm like, so I'm generally like a person who wants to be friends with the other underdog. I'm like, I'm like, this one's an underdog and seems like an outlier wolf by themselves. I'm going to go over there and like try to connect. Maybe that creates some like interesting, powerful dynamic here. I look at these two groups and I can't believe how many people cannot stand them. It's fucking insane. Like, they are so hated and disliked. And sometimes I talk to a Jewish person and they don't hate Palestinians. I talk to Palestinians and they don't hate Jewish people. But like, it seems like everyone else not Jewish and not Palestinian has a whole bunch of feelings about how these two groups should be getting along and feeling about each other.
And I think this is what really bummed me
why is
out.
Iranian, like, why is everyone involved in these people's business? Like, why can they not find a way?
I think this is what really bummed me out after October 7th, because I had come from a history of being extremely pro-Palestine.
Why were you pro-Palestine?
Because I was raised in a culture in
But what made you care about them?
So, I mean, I was always part of this kind of like social justice movement. Obviously, you know, we have our own history with our own traumas with Islamic Republic, and that kind of pushed me into the social justice advocacy world, pushed me into criminal justice world. And Palestine is still to this day such an obvious cause, but at that time it was.
But everyone says it's not just an obvious cause; it's like the cause.
It's
in
the cause,
our time.
It's the cause of our time. All of this stuff. So it's obvious. Like, if you're in social justice and you have no sense of Palestine, then where are you? Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I've been avoiding it like the plague for my entire life, and people have shamed me for it. And I am happy to say, I'm so grateful I avoided it, because I clearly did not have the emotional capacity or intelligence to be able to handle the space you need to care about this thing, because it requires you to commit to no hatred.
Right. So at that time, that was my world. It was a very pro-Palestine world. And then after I left London, so then I started unpacking this other side of this story that was giving me this like holistic view of this conflict. It was like I was increasing in enlightenment over time, right, as years go by. And it's ultimately bringing me back. The more I know, the more it brings me into compassion for these two groups, right? So I think what bowled me over and fucked me up and broke me down after October 7th was like, I've exhausted so much careful energy into like this thing that is so delicate, and to just see people just like shit on it and rip it up and like read two things and go around destroying people, destroying buildings, just from knowing absolutely nothing about this really, really sensitive thing, you know? And just seeing that to me was just like, is this what people do? Is this what society does? Like, this is so disturbing that you can somehow access this amount of brutality in your body from just like a quick read of something that you completely don't understand, you know? But to answer your question, what was it about the Palestinian cause specifically? You know, the fact that they don't have self-determination, I think, is a huge part of it, because that, like, they're the only state of people that isn't actually a state. Like, they don't have their own state, right? They don't have their independence. They don't have self-determination. And the problem with that, I mean, it's obviously a problem, but one of the big problems with that is that it doesn't put them on equal footing, right? It doesn't, in terms of power dynamics, it doesn't put them on equal footing with their neighbor. And I think that's what makes the Palestinian cause so sensitive, is that if you have two competing nations, it's at least the power dynamic is seen as a little bit more balanced, regardless of who you side with. And I think that's what people in general struggle with, even if they arrive at a place where they're able to see Israel and Palestine from a balanced and nuanced perspective, which everybody should. I think the thing that they really struggle to reconcile is like, but there isn't a fair power balance here, you know?
I mean, it's an abuse. I mean, I find it hard to, at this point, I don't, any which way I look at it, I can't see, for those people who are so angry that they call it resistance, I don't condone it, I don't support it, but I literally understand.
To have this conversation about the morality of resistance would be a legitimate conversation if it was resistance, okay? What you're talking about is imperialists, terrorists.
But they don't know that. But they don't know that.
They don't know that.
Yeah,
they don't know that. But
we know that.
We know that.
Like,
but
we
that
saw
would
them,
be a
we're like,
different conversation.
100%.
Like, if there was, like, for
but
example,
they're just desperate for anyone to give a fuck. Like, settlers have been going on. Vice has been
right,
making.
But so like, if there was like a resistance movement, for example, an organic movement out of the West Bank, right?
Yep. Yes.
And let's say that involved in like serious IDF casualties or whatever, then we can start talking about like, oh, well, man, like these IDF kids, they're like 18, 20 years old. They didn't even have a choice. But, oh, man, these Palestinians in these occupied territories, what else were they supposed to do? They've been living in these oppressive conditions. That's when we have the conversation about morality, right? But that didn't happen. That's not what happened.
But it happened in 21. It happened in 20. It happened in 18. It happened in 19. I saw the numbers in 16. When I look at the book, I flipped through Motaz's Instagram going back to 2017. Mm-hmm. I can tell you Chindeshem showed. I was literally like, fuck.
Yeah.
They've been bombing them the whole time like this? What the fuck is going? How is this going on? Why would we let something like that go on? We know what this is going to become. It's just, for me, I feel like the leaders of our world are grossly irresponsible.
Yes, but I also think, like you have to look at a situation where what you're not seeing on the other side of that is that Hamas is firing rockets into Israel every day, but Israel has an Iron Dome. So you're seeing there's actually two things going on here.
But why is Hamas even there? Why is it not just fucking Palestine? Why is it Hamas? Why are we letting these people be run by a terrorist organization? Well, what do you think is going to happen?
I think they tried for 100 years to not let, there's been so much foreign involvement. It's not like it wasn't a laissez-faire policy.
So let's talk about the Iranian diaspora and why we're split. Mm-hmm. Why are we split?
I think we have a split on perception about this issue. I think it's not half-half. It doesn't actually matter what it is. One group believes that they see Israel as being akin to the Islamic Republic, so they project all their hatred onto Israel. The other group sees Hamas as being the Islamic Republic as a proxy, so they project all of their hatred onto Hamas. And the hatred of the Islamic Republic is so strong in us that it's a deep, deep, deep trigger.
Yeah. Because we want a democratic Iran, so we need a democratic Israel.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're willing to literally
And this is so much closer to our story than people understand. Number one, because of course Hamas is a proxy of the Islamic Republic. Number two, because some of us are Jews. There are Persian Jews within our own community. So when people say, oh, this doesn't affect Iranians, it affects Iranian Jews, Number three, whatever the Islamic Republic is successful or unsuccessful in directly affects our country. Number four, they are using the people's money, their embezzled money, to fund these things that the people aren't consenting to, right? And it's not like tax dollars, it's literally stolen money from the country. So there's so much, and like you said, the stability of the future, the new Iran, is going to depend on its strong relationship and allyship with Israel, Saudi.
Yes.
And so these are all really, really, really central to the Iranian people, the future of the Iranian people. And these relations have always been close, either negatively or positively, right? Israel and Palestine, that issue has always been close to Iran, you know, because there's an intersection there. So I think the split, yes, comes from not half, some seeing it that way, some seeing it that way. And I think also, just like I said, you know, it's your perception based on what your values are, right? So being in this world of justice, racial justice, criminal justice, my perception was, and this is why I was able to get to both sides, right? So I spent many, many years on the pro-Palestine, exclusively on the pro-Palestine side of things, because it's a human rights issue. It's all of these issues, right? And then when I understood the perspective of Israelis now, where you're talking about Yemeni Jews, Iraqi Jews, Iranian Jews, Egyptian Jews,
Moroccan
Jews, just Mizrahi Jews. And you're talking about these people
Ethiopian Jews. Yeah.
Ethiopian Jews being kind of exiled, persecuted, struggling to survive,
arrested,
to get back onto their
prison,
lands, all of that stuff, you know, and you can't help but be so sympathetic to their experiences. And then the way that they have to exist in the world of people just constantly abusing them just for existing, right? Calling them the worst things on the planet. And they also fall into that group that humanitarians, we seek to protect the vulnerable. So in that way, I mean, to me, it was I saw it on both sides. I saw Palestinians as vulnerable and I saw Israelis as vulnerable. But I think in general, most people have a hard time. Well, I won't say most people, because you're right, it's a loud minority.
Yes.
Some people have a hard time humanizing and recognizing the vulnerability of both sides, and they only see it exclusively as one, not the other.
So if you had a magic wand, what would you do today?
If I had a magic wand, there would be one land shared between them, and they would be just the maximum besties of all time. And they would be one community that supported each other so intensely that if you tried to come for one, the other would destroy you, because they'd be that's my bestie.
So one state.
Well, no, because I'm not saying that I think that's possible right now, but hopefully in the future.
I would think so, because again, I look at two group of people who've been so persecuted and so abused and
and have so much genetic overlap,
and also they have literally, they look the same. They are from the same place.
Yeah.
And they have both been
basically cousins.
They are basically cousins, and they are.
And we want our future Iran to have a great relationship with both of them. We want a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, and we want to welcome them to us and us to them.
Right.
Can you imagine?
I can. I feel like you can too, which is why
this
is annoying for everyone else, because I'm these people, they shouldn't be governed by Hamas. Why would someone no offense to whatever, but
we shouldn't be governed by the Islamic Republic.
Correct.
We're so
I
much
think
better
the
than
Palestinian people are more deserving than their leadership being
and
Hamas.
They know that.
And that's what makes me fucking annoyed, because I'm this is not
but
who you are.
Going back to this split that we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is why you and I have played such an important role in kind of bridging this split, even though we've been so fucking hated beyond anything.
And we don't get along on all of it either.
No, we don't. But that's fine, because the point is that we both see what each other is doing as an attempt to bridge rather than as an attempt to divide, because that's where we'd lose each other, right? If either of us started coming out with divide and conquer, and we would not be able to connect in the same way. But I think this role as people who are so close to the conflict, Iranians and Yemenis particularly, and Lebanese,
And Syrian
And
and Iraqi.
Syrian.
Like, that's the one thing that's been really
And Iraqi
cool
and Assyrians.
with you and a small group of people that we've like been sharing in content with is all of a sudden there was like an influx of Indian activists, Yemenis activists, Iraqi activists, Syrian activists, many women coming forward who are victims of Islamicism and speaking up for the first time. Like, that has been, oh my God, meeting the women from Afghanistan. Like, I've had all these incredible Zooms with people. There's so many of us who feel this way.
But I think like being those voices in those communities that are doing bridge building work,
Right.
you know, I follow this guy and I just totally forgotten his name. He's Arab. And he does so much of this. It's just, it's seeing our voices right now are such important voices. Like we're in between, right? We're in between like being actually in the conflict, being either Israeli or Palestinian, Jewish, Arab, whatever, actually being Israeli or Palestinian, and then the West being like a world away. And then you have these Middle Eastern communities in between these two worlds that it is our job to bridge build. And so when we find that in each other, like I find like that account that I'm talking about, for example, he's more of a pro-Palestine account, even though he's a bridge building person, right? And so it doesn't matter that every account doesn't have to be more this side or more that side to be the right way, as long as they're bridge building. Okay, so if this account is a little bit more pro-Israel, but they're still bridge building, do you see what I'm saying?
Of course.
So finding those voices has been great.
I agree. So I feel like we have a set of accounts that we both like love, and we're like, yes, more of these accounts, helping them grow, wanting them to grow, more Yemenis voices, more voices from Syria, Iraq. And then there's...
Can we pause for 5 seconds? I've been needing to pee for a very long time.
Do it. Yeah.
But hold on to this because we're getting into the good stuff. We're back in business.
Yeah.
I think we've also kind of united in this shared feeling of abandonment by the left.
I feel abandoned by just my leadership.
Okay,
for me.
So for me,
like, I never counted on the left to begin with because the left would never have me. I'm
heteronormative queer.
Correct. I was never raised.
And that's the problem with the left.
That's also the problem with the right. The right won't have me either.
True.
The right won't have me.
We talk about our own, you know?
I hear you.
It's the same, like...
No one will have me, and I'm okay with it.
It's the same thing as, like, the first wave of feminism, right? The first wave of feminism...
You mean white feminism?
It's all white feminism.
It wasn't always white feminism. Actually, it began intersectional, but with black women. Queer women, to be correct. The real feminism.
So the first wave of feminism said to women that if you stay at home and become a wife and cook and clean, you're a bad woman and you need to go out into the world. And then the second wave was like, oops, no, we're supposed to just let women just choose for themselves what they want to be, right? So it sounds like the left is in that first wave of feminism with you, like, oh, you're not the right queer, until they like correct it and come back and be like, oh, wait, no, you are whatever queer you want to be and I don't get to dictate. So it's that commonality of experience with the left that we have, right? That they say to us now, you're not the right Middle Eastern. You have to be a terrorist-loving Middle Eastern, right? You're not the Middle Eastern that we decide that we want you to be.
Well, you have to be anti-West.
We have to be anti-West. And so I think connecting with so many more Middle Eastern people has just been amazing because we have that shared abandonment by the left.
Yes.
Of like, really?
But
like,
it's like...
And I think for me, where it was triggered was during the Iran Revolution when Biden decided to give $6 billion in that hostage deal. And we were like atting the senators, like Senator Chris Murphy on Twitter every day, like, we don't support this. And him just like completely gaslighting us and like putting out these propaganda videos about how Biden is doing the right thing. And then obviously later refreezing the money because we fucking told you so after October 7th, right? But it was like, oh, you don't really care about us. You're a liar. You're using us as pawns for your politics. Like, of course, we always knew that this is what politics was about, right? Which is why representation matters, because you can't really know what you're fighting for. Chris Murphy has not a single clue Okay, that's like it's a
None of these people, not the squad, not
none of them,
not the ones who are chanting for bombs in Iran. None of these people care about us. None of them want to take responsibility to how the Islamic Republic even came to be.
Or even acknowledge that they're a problem.
Correct. That's true. They also don't want to. They think that they can just wall it in, like the way they walled in COVID-19, like which didn't happen because Islamic Republics on Columbia campuses, y'all. Like, see how it is? It's here.
Do you know who Shi Wang is?
No, who's that?
Shi Wang is a Chinese-American academic. He was a hostage of the Islamic Republic.
Whoa.
I think, did he go to, I don't know if it was Columbia or Harvard. I think it was Columbia. What's the other one that begins with N? Oh my God. Maybe it doesn't begin with N. Princeton.
Okay. So that's with a
Princeton. P. Yeah. I knew there was an N in there. Okay, so one of those. And he writes about, like, I've read his articles, they're amazing. He writes about how he was totally consumed by this leftist academic education that was totally like pro-Islamic Republic and like, we've just misunderstood them. It's just their culture. They're actually the good guys. They're misunderstood. Da, da, da. It was Princeton. So he ends up going to Iran and he's taken hostage, of course. Yeah. Of course.
Yep.
Jasus, American spy, da, 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 what have you. So he's in there. He comes out in 2016 and he just starts writing about, he's like, we are such fucking idiots.
Yes.
Like, they are not the good guys. They're monsters.
I don't understand whoever said they were the good guy.
He completely flipped his idea. But it was a perfect representation of how, like, it's ideology. It's not fucking real. Like, as soon as you go into the belly of the beast, just imagine having that wake up of like, oh my God, this is what Iranians have been trying to say for, like, this is the reality of their experience that has been so twisted by Western academia that is desperately looking for.
Well, part of that is because they've been able to control the media and censorship.
Yeah.
Right? Part of it is that they were able to control the voices of Iranian youth and people. They were able to control art and filmmakers and academics and students. And now, because of Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, we now see there's millions of young Iranians who are rappers, artists, musicians, filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, documentarians.
I don't actually know that that's a word.
It is.
Oh,
it is.
Okay.
Yes. Graphic designers, ballet dancers, comedians, cooks. Like, just so many fucking amazing viral things. Like, I love going on their Instagrams and being like, damn, you have like 800,000 followers, 400,000 followers, 300,000 followers. Like, crushing the algorithm, like hit after hit. And everything they're trying to tell us, whether it's making a kotlet or like dancing in the streets, is that they hate this fucking government. And they want us to get them the fuck out of there. So I feel like we have to tell their story to the world to help the West understand that they have been manipulated.
Yeah. I think it's really hard. It's really hard for people who don't know this experience to even conceive of it. And I see that in their analysis, because their analysis has so many blind spots, because they automatically assume things that you would only assume if you had some type of trust in your government, in your state, in your system. Like, for example, a Western person will be like, oh, I don't think this is true because this statistic says, and then you're like, God, you don't even know that they produce misleading statistics because you have this privilege of trust with your government, that you live in a democracy that allows for transparency. So you can be sure that certain things, there's a democratic process to ensuring that those are valid statistics, right? You take that for granted. So when you eat, the way that your brain is even trying to conceive of a dictatorship like the Islamic Republic, you can't even conceptualize it because there are so many blind spots in even putting it together. Like, you forgot that you can't trust this part. You forgot that this part is different. You don't understand that this doesn't work the same. It's hard for them to even conceptualize that degree of dictatorship outside of just like a straight up caricature.
I think the left and the right are pretty similar at this point. Like, I don't really see a big difference between, like, I don't experience my like ultra left and my ultra right friends as like that different.
They're the same.
They both don't trust the government.
Yeah.
They both don't like capitalism. They're both just...
I think when Candace Owens became Free Palestine, it was like, okay, now the left and the right are the same, because that was it. That was the last step.
Poor Candace Owens is never going to live that down.
Oh, I don't think I don't think she wants to live that down.
No, I'm not saying that like...
Oh, that she's left.
Like what I'm saying is that...
Well, the question is,
she's now
right,
become
or is the right
like
left?
those TikTok stitches are my favorite of ever. She's like, in what fucking world am I agreeing with Candace Owens and Bernie Sanders is pro-war? Like, we saw the whole world flip-flop. Bernie Sanders is on a tour all over the world right now trying to save his brand name and likeness because he went on a rant about how Israel had the right to do whatever it wanted to get rid of Hamas, and now
you're right.
Literally,
and then Candace Owens was on the right.
Totally, and now I saw him give an interview today, and he looked broken because the left and his audience is literally like.
But I thought Bernie was super like anti-Zionist.
I think he absolutely believes in Israel's right to exist. I think he absolutely does not believe in Bibi Netanyahu's right to defend Israel.
I see.
And what he is doing, I think he thinks that guy is an actual warmonger.
Okay, so he has good opinions, it sounds like.
I agree with him. Okay. I think he got sucked into the abyss of...
He should not have even said that Israel has the right to exist, was the problem.
No, I think he probably should have... I think it was a little... There should have been a lot of restrictions around what they were giving and what they could be using it for before they just unloaded, like, I don't even know, $800 million zillion of military equipment to Bibi. Like,
oh, you're talking about the U.S.?
Like, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Like, I think that when history looks back, like, a more...
But America has its own motivations. You know, it has
we're
one ally in the Middle East, one. No, it has Saudi, but
we have Saudi.
It has, let's say this, it has one state that breaks the Islamic hegemony. If it's not for Israel, there's pan-Islamism.
Which didn't even exist until they fucked up Iran. Let's just be real.
Exactly.
Didn't exist. In fact, all of the Middle East was on its way to a vibe.
Yes. To a vibe.
To a real vibe. Like all Beirut, Lebanon, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. Like it was all going.
Here's the thing. Like,
they traded it all for oil.
They traded it all for oil, but there's one state that, one tiny state the size of New Jersey that America relies on to disrupt the Islamic hegemony. It's kind of like that thing where, like, you know, you're a parent and you have, like, let's say you have like 8 kids. And you're always like banking on the fact that your kids you never realize that they actually outnumber you, because then you're fucked, right? Because they can just all be like, we're not going to do anything. And what are you going to do about it? Like, you just always bank on the fact that your kids are never going to realize that. I think the US doesn't want to get to a point where the Middle East does become this pan-Islamic region, as in every country is an Islamic, well, it's not every country, but whatever. And then they all realize, well...
Don't you think that is such a, like... When I think about that, I think it is such a basic, rudimentary, racist, to believe that all of those countries are the same because they're Muslim.
No, they're not all the same.
Not even close to the same.
It's not that.
Yeah.
It's just that they might end up realizing that they have one common enemy. The US.
Well,
you don't want to put all of your enemies in a room together.
They definitely already have. They've already did that, like decades ago, when they decided to invade Iraq and Afghanistan, and they like supercharged. No, actually, I take that back. They did that the moment they decided to not just aid getting rid of the Shah of Iran, but to also support Saddam Hussein killing millions of Iranians with weapons of mass destruction. Like, we have made. As much as I have huge criticisms for America, and I could spend hours going on about all the ways in which we suck, I'm never, ever, ever lost on me that I am so lucky to be alive, because I would literally be hanging from a crane in Iran. Mm-hmm. It's just the irony of the situation is so brutal. I want to believe that America makes these choices out of greed and ignorance and not out of...
So let me ask you this then. Controversial question.
Sure.
Since you know you would be hanging from a crane
Yes.
in Iran,
Yes.
what do you think about when people use the term pinkwashing on Israel?
Good question. I think I feel differently about that pre-7th than post-7th.
Okay.
I think pre-7th, I felt like it gave me joy to see queers in the Middle East, like just being their best selves and having a good time. I've always wanted to go to Tel Aviv for gay pride, but I'd always wanted to go to Israel. I commend them for trying to have a LGBTQ plus, like, I don't even want to say presence, but like an effort in the Middle East, which is like crazy ass controversial. But post 7th, yes, it's hella pinkwashing.
You think so?
Yes.
What makes you say that?
I think that we've all either been that person or had that person in your life that like does something fucked and then does all kinds of things to like cover up why they did this fucked thing. I was tired. I was hungry. I was in a bad mood because something bad happened earlier that day. I was feeling like you didn't really want me there. Like there's always a reason, but they did something terrible. I think that whether or not it's terrible, we don't like, okay,
I think what you're trying to say more, and I don't know if this is what you're getting at, is the example of somebody who does something that's terrible, but they also do really good things. Is that what you mean?
I'm talking about when, like, people do a shitty thing happens, whether, like, let me think of a good example. You snap at a friend, right?
Okay,
like, I've snapped at people I love in my life many times and then had to go back and be like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, I was hungry, my raging headache. I just was out of sorts that day. I'm so sorry that I was a fucking asshole when you just asked me where do I want to eat tonight? And then I fucking go off on you. I feel like the Israeli military and government went off on the people of Gaza in a way that has people ashamed. Like, they're just like, I am, like, not only, like, they're just mortified. Like, this is being done in their name. So the next natural thing to do, because you love your country and you love your people, is to be like, well, we're not this terrible thing that our government has done. We have gay pride. We have almost gay marriage. We have gay people who are citizens of our country. And that's, you know, like, there are things about us that are still great, even though, like, this other very bad thing is going on over there. And so...
Okay, so I saw something the other day that really was quite significant to me. It was a post that was made by a Hindu woman, and she said something like, and I can't remember how she phrased it, but it was just so epic. She was like, pinkwashing is colonizer for brown people shouldn't have human rights, so don't celebrate them where they exist. And I thought it was so profound because when you think of where the term pinkwashing comes from, which is like literally the Bay Area, right? Like, it really is colonizer speak for, like,
Sure.
How dare, like, you celebrate this one place in the Middle East where LGBTQ Middle Eastern people, like, actually have rights, you know? And so to me, there is an undertone of racism behind the term pinkwashing, because it fundamentally kind of refutes the principle of celebrating places where brown people have human rights, whether that's Israel or another place in the Middle East. But at the same time, that shouldn't be used as a distraction for, like, Israeli government's policies in Gaza. Like, it shouldn't be used as a distraction.
So then when Them magazine, which is like a big gay publication that Condé Nast owns, they did this big Instagram editorial piece about gay people really have what gay life looks like inside Gaza. And my mind was actually fucking blown.
Okay.
When I saw it. Like, I was like, wait, what? Like,
what was it?
It was just like pinkwashing Gaza, basically saying that Gaza
Oh,
was
they were saying like it was
a great place to be
really?
queer. Yes. I think it goes both ways. I think they both did it. I think that
because I think you have to highlight what's real about the thing and ignore.
they had real couples living in same-sex households, and it was a whole editorial spread of 10 couples throughout Gaza who live out and proud gay lives.
Where? In Gaza?
In Gaza.
Okay.
I promise you, I sent this to 20 people because this was early.
It was like pinkwashing.
It was early October, and I was beside myself because I was like, what is going on? This is before someone had broken down for me the distinction between Islamic Republic and Hamas. I didn't understand those distinctions as well as I do now. But at that time, I'm like, they're the same, which now I understand they're the same like operating system, but different software.
Okay.
Right? Like they're the same hardware, different software.
Okay.
Right? Like they don't operate, like it's not the same features.
Okay.
Different features in Gaza than Islamic Republic. Islamic Republic, a bit more homophobic, a bit more willing to kill.
You think a bit more homophobic?
So again, this is what
I mean, they beheaded somebody last year for being gay.
I know. I'm just saying
That
that
could have been in the West
a
Bank.
bit. I said a bit. Like I'm not saying radically. I'm saying like
no, but I don't know if they're a bit more.
I don't. Again, this is like based on. Listen, this is Condé Nast doing a fucking. I mean, this isn't like my opinion. This was like Time Out. This was literally like multiple gay publications were like, a great place to be gay is Gaza, and I was like I think I threw myself on the floor and just had like a conniption fit.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this can't possibly be happening. Like this is an actual hell because I'm still very attached to this democratic Israel. So yes, but it does lead me to believe of like the level of, so like the Jewish diaspora, the diaspora in North America, which I have truly felt for, like watching the Jewish diaspora in North America and Europe go through this situation and having to like be like, it's kind of a weird thing to go from like nobody's paying attention to you to like all of a sudden you're like even if you don't want to be an influencer, you're fucking influencer all of a sudden. Like you just by happening to be fucking Jewish, to being Iranian. Like you may be like a famous Jewish something or another, but all of a sudden like you're a spokesperson for Israel and Jewish people. Like, don't you think, I feel like all of my friends were like, what the fuck? I just, they're like, no one was qualified to be a spokesperson.
You don't think so?
No.
I think so.
I think everyone can be a spokesperson on their experience, on their experiences, but I think being a spokesperson for war is super duper difficult.
For war, no, but just for the Jewish experience.
For your Jewish experience, yes.
Because I was following some of them.
But there's a difference
October
between
7th.
Jewish and Israeli government.
Well, I mean, even those, like, I was following, like, Roots Metals, like, obviously Matthew Nuriel, my friend Gabby. Like, I was following a bunch of those accounts before October 7th.
Sure, big Women Life Freedom people.
Well, no, they weren't Women Life Freedom. They were talking about the Jewish Israel thing.
Before the 7th.
Yeah, that's where I was learning it for the last, like, before October 7th. So I think there's many of those accounts that had been building up. And it's funny because when I had my thing where I, like, my eyes opened to this other side of this conflict, and I remember being on the phone to Matthew and being like, why didn't you tell me? Or like, where were all these people? Why didn't I know? And he just kept saying to me, like, babe, we've been here the whole time. This information has been in front of you the whole time. You've just chosen to ignore it. And I'm like, no, it can't be. It can't be. He's like, it is.
Right.
And so it's like this world of Jewish activists that have been like saying this. They've been saying this for years. Same as like Iranian diaspora.
Yes.
You know, like there's been people that have been dedicating their lives to this, but we were just choosing to ignore it, you know?
I just didn't want to know anything about Israel-Palestine.
Yeah.
So I was like self-preservation and also like not ready for that class. Like, and just like wasn't ready to, I just didn't have the like words. And so I've met with some of, for sure, a lot of the folks that you mentioned. I've also like met the woman who made that film Israelism, and like the heavy duty, like I would call it like the reformist Rabbi Sharon Brous, who I think is like one of the most like prolific people out there. I don't understand how she is not like at the forefront of this fucking conversation. I don't understand at all, but she is insanely, the space she holds for love and hope is, I think, profound. I think people like her, my hope is, can become louder, bigger, more platformed voices. But I've also seen like some things that I definitely am not afraid to say scare me. I've seen some things that are like frightening.
Like what?
I think that there has been like a movement towards, is it nationalism? Is it, God, it's so hard because it's like on one side, I really understand the need to like want to be self-protective and protect. On the other side,
there's nationalism on both sides.
Yeah.
I think there's like river to the sea on one side, and then there's like Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, kind of like, let's take it all.
But like the problem for me is there's Ben Gvir, Bibi influencers just with better fonts. They're the same people. Like, I do this all the time. I'll just go to like certain websites that I've mentioned to you. I'll go to both of these websites and then I'll go to these influencers and it's the same exact message. Just one of them has cute fonts, cute creative, cuter words, same message. It's like the same. And if I had a magic wand, my magic wand would get rid of all international lobbyist groups. I don't want international lobbying groups in our country. I don't want international lobbying groups.
But what about lobbying for the right things?
I don't want lobbyist groups.
You don't think that the Iranian diaspora should have a lobby for a free Iran?
I think that because the most authentic, virtuous voices seem to never be the best at fundraising, and we are generally not that good at getting power. The people who seem to be amazing at getting power seem to be very...
So it's kind of like this idea that because the death penalty can sometimes wrongfully kill people, we just shouldn't have the death penalty.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the death penalty.
No, neither am I. But I'm like just an analogy to that type of philosophy.
That's a good example.
Right?
I'm like a not
because it's so
getting it wrong is
right
like
for getting it wrong.
Yes.
That even if it has any social utility, it's not worth it.
Correct.
That's what you're saying about lobbying.
Yes. I don't like whether it's Russia or China or Islamic Republic, as you and I both know their name, that we're so terrified we won't even say it.
But then how could we get our governments to, because I think one of the things that makes America what is considered to be a great country, I know that there's a lot of...
It is a great country.
Okay, I agree.
I love this country.
Many ways
I'm like, I tell everyone all the time, and I know people hate me for it, but like, I have a queer Iranian family with 2 boys. I can vote. I'm married. I'm successful. I'm safe. Like,
and that's the thing.
The police come when I call them. Like, come on.
This is the thing that like white liberals don't understand about the minority experience is that there's this duality to it, right? Especially for people who are immigrants, refugees, asylees, whatever, that this land gives us roots. It gives us freedom that we wouldn't have in our own countries. It's an escape. That like there's so much we have to be grateful for.
Yes.
But at the same time, we are so critical and so, that we're so involved in the movement to make this country a better place, right? So it's like, it's very hard, especially for white liberals, to understand this duality that like we love it and we hate it at the same time in so many ways, especially because of what it has done to the Middle East. Like,
they've ruined us.
Bring Khomeini into Iran, like, there's that hatred of like, God, you ruined my homeland, but also like, I can be here.
But we have the ability to know the difference between our government and people.
Our government and people, yes.
I love Americans, and I see the American government as complicit to many bad things that have been done in the world.
But so where I was originally going with this is that one of the things that makes America great, one of its positives, is the things that are achieved through lobbying, which is that what lobbying does, even though it's misused so much, is that it allows the people to achieve dramatic shifts in change, right? By presenting to Congress, right? And then like having shifts in like policy, having shifts in law, actually making a difference, moving the landscape of this country all done from the people, and that is through it's through lobbying, it's through our democratic republic, right? That we have elected representatives that speak on our behalf. All of these things is what makes America such a powerful and precocious country, you know? And so I feel like that lack of influence, that conduit through lobbying, I think it would reduce the influence that we have on changing the landscape of the
Probably.
country.
It would mean that we're in a lot less wars, which I know drives a huge part of our economy.
Or maybe more.
True.
Maybe more.
Maybe.
You know?
But I think that, like, America's...
Imagine if for the past 10, 15, 20, whatever years, instead of having the Islamic Republic lobby, imagine we had like Iranian freedom, democratic, secular lobby, like a Nufti, for example, or just Nufti, being that lobby. Imagine how much policy could have been shifted in all those years, which would have dramatically changed the landscape of where we are today. I feel like there's just like a handful of accounts that I follow that are like, I don't know, they show me the world through their eyes in a way that is so compassionate still and humanitarian and holistic. And yeah, I guess I just continue to be impressed by those accounts and maybe just don't pay too much attention to
The big war energy.
From both sides. Because
I muted and unfollowed all the big war.
And so many people send me these accounts and these like pro-Hamas things where I'm like, dude, I'm not even looking at it. Like I actually cannot look at it for my own mental health. So I think that I've just like mentally started tuning out things that are just...
Same.
I can't deal.
So I love using the tagline of ending the era of influence. I feel like ending the era of influence.
Oh, era of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love
era.
it. It's like
just speak English, woman. No, just kidding.
End the era of influence. I feel like as the
era
ultimate
of influence. Okay.
ending the era of influence. As the person who crushed creating influence was like, God, I cannot believe that 13 years ago I gave a TED talk about creating the era of influence, and now I'm sitting here doing a fucking podcast about ending the era of influence. Because I think we need leaders. I think we need leadership. We need communicators. We need people who are willing to be educated, schooled, told, change their minds, have conversations. I think the last thing in life we need right now are a bunch of people that think they have all the answers and have a platform and are just screaming at each other.
Yeah. I think that, there are some, there's this landscape now of influencerdom where kind of anyone can be an influencer and they can cross over their respective fields in a way that can be quite dangerous. Like you could come up as an influencer, like selling sportswear or doing
baseball cards,
weights,
whatever. Yeah.
And then transfer that, develop like a fan base of like millions of followers, and then develop that into starting to talk about politics or foreign affairs that you're wholly unfamiliar with and saying very, very dangerous misinformation, right? So I think ending the era of influence is more like ending the era of unqualified influence, right?
Sure.
Because there are some people that should be influencers that often are not, because that's too boring, right? The too boring people that have all the facts and, actually talk sense. There's nothing like sexy about that. So maybe reimagining, re-hierarchizing
sure.
influence.
We'll just make up words.
We'll make up words during this campaign.
I would it's like I want like people like Alone Lee to have like millions and millions of followers. Mm-hmm. I'm like let someone who has a vision for one loving land. Like I want love to lead with the influence. Mm-hmm. Like that's my wish. I want people who are going to inspire love and grace and empathy and breakthrough.
But the thing is, I don't think everyone is a leader. And I would take myself as an example, right? I'm a thinker, but I'm not a leader. And so I think that, and I say this, I guess it's kind of like Tupac kind of said the same thing. I might not be the one to change the world, but I will be the one to spark the mind that does. Kind of that principle is that there does need to be a world for thinkers, because thinkers shape thought, right? We shape thought. And then from thought, people develop understanding that forms great leaders, right? So I'm not that leader because it's just not my personality. I don't have that type of personality. I have too much anxiety. But someone with an overwhelm of confidence who is shaped by like thoughts that are grounding them in the reality that they're leading, those people are the people that, you know, we need. But we also need everyone else, the lovers, the thinkers, the this, to shape that leader for us. Does that make sense?
Amen. Like, we need that person now.
Yeah.
Like, right now. Because as we speak, there is, like, an actual crisis. Like, I'm literally just...
And that person, those people, those leaders, they are going to be the bridge builders that we were talking about.
Yes.
From those communities, right? From Middle Eastern communities, neighboring Middle Eastern communities that have this goal in common. And it reminds me of something that my friend Sam Hyde said, where I was talking to him about, like, I was like, gosh, you know, the Iranian community, like, we could really stand to learn from the Jewish community because you guys are
always felt this way.
You know,
always felt this way.
You're so unified.
They're
so unified.
So tight.
And he said something that was so profound that I always remember. I say this like he said it 10 years ago. It was like a month ago. He was like, what we did as Jews is that we mastered unity, not uniformity.
Right.
And that was so profound because he was like, we aren't uniform. We don't all have the same thoughts. We're actually, we dissent a lot. We're dissenters. But we've mastered unity through the dissent. And I was like, bingo, that's it. That's the art that's going to, quote unquote, save us, right? The Middle East. Unity, not uniformity. We don't need to convince everybody in the Middle East to see any of this the same way. And doing so is weird and fascistic and not what we're looking for. We want democracy. We want diversity. So what we need to master, what the Middle East needs to master, what the Iranian community needs to master, what all of these respective diasporas need to master for us to build these bridges is unity, not uniformity. And once we figure that out, I think that's when we're going to get to the other side of this nightmare.
Well, with that, I thank you for joining us on this short chat of ours. Just kidding. We've never had a short chat ever. It's like a short 1 hour chat, and that's a short phone call.
Thank you so much for having me.
But I think you have a great brain, and I love talking to you.
Thank
I think that it has been a lot less lonely on the interwebs. And you have made me laugh, cry, and made me angry and frustrated. And a famous quote by you is that you don't take direction.
That's true.
So
I did tell you that.
You did tell me that.
I said respectfully.
Respectfully, I don't take
direction from anyone.
And I was like, I'm going to text her back in 3 days. But thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for being a friend in the lonely space, you know. To just get through this dark time until we can get through the other side, which I really do think that, you know, like people like you who also like building these bridges and have an interest in doing so, giving me hope that there is a place that we can get to on the other side.
I love to build a bridge. That's my favorite thing to do.
I would like that to be my career.
I love
like
doing
literally
it.
just picking up the cement and the bricks and
I
just
really just want everyone to come with us back to Iran.
A laborer, yes.
A free Iran.
Like build mud bridges.
But that's like I feel good when I build one. Like I'm like, ooh, I made that connection happen.
Yeah, it feels great.
It does
feels
for
great.
me. For me, that's like a high.
It feels great to operate in a way that you're creating love.
Yes,
you know,
that's what I'm serious. Like I love that feeling all the time. I'm like, yes. Like whenever I see someone repost your post that I introduced, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Yeah. No, I totally feel that way. And that's just like leaning into that instead of leaning into this like hatred, division, divisiveness, tearing apart, war energy. Like having somebody there that's not in that war energy to be in this building space.
I know, it's so hard not to be war energy, man.
I know.
Just gotta stay in this vibe. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Khodafis. Love you. See you.
Bye.